All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Major developments over the past 24 hours. Apparently, there has been an MoU agreed upon by the United States and Iran. After a crazy weekend of fighting in Lebanon, putting this deal at risk, we seem to have finally come to an agreement between the two countries, and it is set to be signed on Friday. So we'll be talking all about the available details we have of this deal. We don't have the official draft yet released, but we have a lot of reports, a lot of rumors as to what it may entail. And it seems, from all the available reporting, like a total capitulation from the United States on a lot of these key terms in this deal. So we'll talk all about that today. And we also do need to discuss the Israel angle of this, because Israel and their allies in the neoconservative media have made it very clear that they intend to do everything possible to scuttle this deal. And that includes continuing their operation and occupation in southern Lebanon, which has put this deal at risk before and will in the future. So we'll talk all about this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
Maybe we should improve the liberty of our own country before we seek to do so abroad. Some of us have paid attention to the fact that the expert class, including the foreign policy experts, lie all the time. The correct answer to this, of course, as it always is liberty. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you could please go down below this video here on YouTube and hit like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, Spotify, and Substack and giving all of those a follow, I'd really appreciate that as well. My Substack in particular, I would highly encourage you to follow, because I've been very active on there, posting a lot of great articles all throughout this negotiation process that I would highly encourage you read. And I will continue to be posting throughout this whole Iran deal situation. So be sure to go follow over there if you want more of my analysis besides just in these podcast episodes. Highly encourage you to go follow over there. But let's get into the news here. We're going to talk all about what happened this weekend, because this weekend was absolutely insane. And it seemed at every moment there were updates happening that were changing the entire dynamic of the negotiations. But we'll start off with what happened just yesterday before we get into this weekend. Yesterday, Trump at 5:29 p.m. Eastern time put out this on his Truth Social. And this came after the Pakistani prime minister said a very similar thing on his X page. It says, quote, "The deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all. I hereby fully authorize the toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz and simultaneously herewith authorize the immediate removal of the United States naval blockade. Ships of the world, start your engines, let the oil flow." This, again, came after Shehbaz Sharif, the prime minister of Pakistan, put out a very similar statement announcing that, brokered by Pakistan and with collaboration with mainly Qatar, Saudi Arabia, some other Gulf countries, the United States and Iran had officially agreed on terms for a memorandum of understanding. Now, I do want to point out before we get into all the details of this weekend, I wrote about this on my Substack. Again, this is why I highly encourage you to go follow my Substack, because I'm giving a lot of analysis there that I give before I actually say it on a podcast episode. On Substack, I talked about this. The MoU is not an Iran deal. That's how it's being framed in the media. The media is kind of running with this. If you read past the headlines, obviously they're getting more detailed about this. But the headlines, and even Shehbaz Sharif in his X post is saying that there's been a peace deal agreed upon. That's not the case. Trump says this all the time. J.D. Vance is on the media tour. We'll get into some clips from him later, claiming that what's been agreed upon here is a comprehensive deal that is going to ensure that Iran, like all this nuclear talk, these very technical terms, none of that has been agreed upon yet. There's not been comprehensive negotiations on the details of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. There have not been agreements made on their missiles or drones or their proxies or any of this stuff, or even who will control the strait. It seems to have been conceded that Iran will control the strait with Oman, but there hasn't been official terms laid out or an agreement made on that. So what has been agreed upon here is a memorandum of understanding. What that is that it basically extends the ceasefire 60 days to create a window where within that window, negotiations can happen that are much more detailed and in-depth on these major pillars of disagreement, the nuclear issue, the Strait of Hormuz probably being the two main ones, as well as maybe some other side issues like the missiles, the drones, and the proxies. Now, people are getting this confused because what Trump is doing right now on Truth Social and in the media is painting it as if we've had a deal made that is already better than the JCPOA. And you see the shills on Twitter, the paid influencers on Twitter, already saying that this deal, which we don't even have the draft of yet, it's not publicly available. We have no real hard information on the entire terms of this deal. What we do have is not looking good for Trump, but we are already hearing from the administration and the influencers that this is a better deal than the JCPOA. Trump did it. He's the only one that could have done this. This is the framing coming out of the White House and their paid influencers, which is just totally not within reality, because what we have right now is an MOU. We don't have a peace deal. The JCPOA was a 160-page document, a comprehensive scientific official technical deal on inspections within the Iranian nuclear program and releasing their frozen assets, all of this stuff, this very technical language that took months and months and months of negotiation from the Obama administration. What we've seen from the Trump administration here is them struggling to even get an MOU. And this MOU is not a comprehensive deal at all. Again, it's an extension of the ceasefire by 60 days, is essentially what it is. And then it creates a window for those negotiations to take place. That's not a comprehensive deal. And they're trying to frame it as this so that they can frame this as much of a win as possible, so that everyone's convinced that we somehow got some sort of a major win from this MOU alone, when all this MOU does is extend the ceasefire so that we can negotiate on these issues. So there's a massive misunderstanding here in the media of what this actually even is. It's a MOU, a memorandum of understanding. It's not a peace deal. It's not a comprehensive final draft of a deal that gets into the technical details of their nuclear program. That's not what it is. So I just want to make that clear and clear up any confusion. Again, if you want to read more in detail about this, go read my Substack article from the other day, but this is an MOU. It's not a final deal. So that needs to be made clear as the administration is trying to convince you it's a final deal, which is kind of insane. It's not a final deal. It's an MOU. Anyways, we'll get into some of the details of what happened this weekend, because this weekend was absolutely crazy. And this entire negotiation process almost came crashing down again for the second weekend in a row because of what Israel is doing in Lebanon. Israel has maintained their occupation of about a fifth of Lebanon at this point. They are literally rolling in the IDF, occupying militarily a fifth of the country right now. They are just flattening entire neighborhoods to create what they're calling a buffer zone between Lebanon and Israel, which is really just going to be a space where settlements are going to be allowed to happen, as we've seen play out in the West Bank. They are rolling in, flattening entire neighborhoods. I urge you, go to CNN's Instagram page. They have a lot of footage, drone footage, of Israel literally detonating entire neighborhoods at once, like blocks and blocks and blocks of homes, literally like suburban homes, just getting completely detonated and flattened all at once in southern Lebanon to make room for an Israeli military occupation of the south. It's just barbaric, evil stuff we were seeing from Israel in Lebanon. Israel yesterday attacked Dahia, Beirut, a suburb of Beirut in Lebanon, in an act of, again, intentional provocation. They were looking for Iran to respond, which Iran was about to do. Iran warned early in the day that they were looking to probably respond to this. It looked like they were about to. They cleared the airspace over the west of the country, and it looked as if they were about to respond. There were multiple reports suggesting Iran was prepping a retaliation against Israel, strikes in northern Israel, as we saw last weekend. And let me just tell you real quick, this is exactly what Israel wanted. They wanted an Iranian response intentionally. They want America to get sucked back into this war. They're looking for any way to escalate this war again to the point where America has to get back involved. And if that means an American troop gets killed because Iran strikes an American base in response, then they're perfectly fine with that. Israel actually would be completely fine with American troops getting killed if it means that America gets sucked back into the war. That's the truth. They are looking for anything possible to get Trump sucked back into the war and make it much more impossible for a deal to be made. Israel's intentionally making it very difficult for a deal to be made because Iran is not going to back away from helping Hezbollah in Lebanon. They've made it very clear they're not going to back away from that. In an effort to increase their influence in the region, as we've seen in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has made it much more clear than they have in the past that they are going to step in defense of Hezbollah, their proxy in Lebanon, and make sure that Israel doesn't occupy a third of the country, everywhere south of the Litani River, which is what they're looking to do right now. So, in an effort to scuttle peace talks, Israel is intentionally continuing the operation in Lebanon, intensifying it, striking within the heart of Beirut, the suburb of Dahia, to intentionally get an Iranian response to escalate this war further. That's the entire intention of Israel's operation. Now, when this looked like it was about to happen, the Trump team, obviously, who's trying to negotiate a peace deal, frantically was trying to get Iran to back away from making these threats and retaliating against Israel. They were frantically trying to do this. And apparently what happened is, first, Trump went to Axios in an effort to get Netanyahu to stop. Trump, again, in what is apparently the only leverage America has, we pay them, we pay all their bills, we pay for their entire military, we send them all the missiles they're using in Lebanon right now. They're striking Lebanon with our missiles in an operation that we're against. And apparently the only leverage we're able to exercise is going to Barack Ravid at Axios and ranting to him on the phone. Somehow this is the only piece of leverage the United States is willing to exercise. But Trump, again, in an act of it looks so weak. The idea that we can't stand up to Netanyahu in any real way, any tangible way. We can't threaten to, cut off the endless amount of funding or the endless amount of weapons that he's using right now in this operation that we're against in Lebanon. We can't cut him off from any of that. We have to endlessly bankroll this military campaign, and then we can go cry about it to Barack Ravid on the phone at Axios. Trump went to Axios again for like the 5th time during this war to rant about Netanyahu. He says, quote, this is Barack Ravid. It says, quote, President Trump tells Axios the United States-Iran deal to end the war is still on track on Sunday, despite Israel's strike in Beirut and the Iranian threat to retaliate. The president is racing to save the deal that nearly collapsed the moment Israel struck Beirut, leaning on private diplomacy and public messaging to get it signed. Iranian officials haven't confirmed the deal is expected to be signed today. Quote, it shook it up. It delayed the signing for a few hours. It was supposed to be now. It is scheduled for a few hours from now, Trump said on the phone call. Apparently, he said, quote, it is too bad. I couldn't believe it. An hour before we were supposed to sign the deal. Quote, why did Bibi have to do a effing attack? I was so pissed off. I let him know. He has no effing judgment. I let him know, Trump said. This is Trump, again, in just an incredibly weak display when we have no willingness to actually put our foot down against the Israelis. We must send them all the money in the world and all the weapons in the world to conduct this military campaign in Lebanon. And when we speak out against it, we have no ability to restrict their access to our endless supply of wealth and weapons. And instead, we are relegated to going to Axios and calling up Barack Ravid and ranting to him, giving him a few explicit quotes to put as the headline, to make it known that Trump is really upset with Netanyahu. He's very mad that Netanyahu is continuing to defy him in this operation in Lebanon. He's very upset. He's going to continue to write him strongly worded checks. So this is the ridiculous display from Trump. And then, so that is what we saw early on in the day. Trump went to Axios and whined to Barack Ravid. Nothing changed. Iran was still planning to retaliate. And then apparently this is what happened. This has not been officially reported, but it has been rumored by multiple different reporters and different sources across the Middle East that this is what apparently happened. The Qatari delegation was in Tehran that day, negotiating on behalf of the United States, trying to come to some sort of an MOU. Apparently, the Qatari delegation, which was in Tehran, was desperately pleading with the Iranians not to retaliate on behalf of the United States. And apparently, again, this is not confirmed. I want to be very clear about that, but this is the rumor that's been discussed by multiple different sources, that apparently the Qatari delegation on behalf of the United States was willing to make some key concessions that got Iran not to retaliate against Israel. Now, with more on that, here is Jeremy Scahill. He's the reporter at Dropsite News. Here is him this morning on Breaking Points discussing some details about that potential situation that happened yesterday in Iran to get Iran not to bomb Israel. Take a look.
Last night when I was speaking to an Iranian official after the Israelis had bombed Dahia, the southern suburb of Beirut, and they said that it's going to be within the next 3 or 4 hours that we're going to launch retaliatory strikes against Israel in response to this bombing. And I was actually preparing a post that I was going to put up quoting the Iranian official, explaining some of the concerns they had about what this says for an agreement. And then Donald Trump comes out and says this is going to be imminent. And then the Pakistani prime minister posts what he posted. And I was told by a source, wait, hold off. There's a meeting going on right now. And what I'm told happened, and again, this is Iran's narrative. We're going to see what happens when we see the formal text. But what they're claiming is that there was a flurry of activity. The mediators on behalf of Trump were begging the Iranians not to actually bomb Israel. And the Iranians claim that they were able to win some last minute concessions in some of the language. One of them involved a more swift reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and the pullback of some American military assets from the region. But the other is that they say that mediators told them that the United States was going to compel the Israelis to pull their troops out of southern Lebanon. That was not in the draft text that I saw a few days ago. So if the Iranian version of this is right, what they're saying is that Trump is saying he's going to force the Israelis to pull out of southern Lebanon. And what's most significant, I think, about the structure of this proposed memorandum of understanding is that the Iranians seem to have been able to build in terms that if the United States doesn't complete them or enforce them, the Iranians can say, well, then we're not going to move toward the 60 days of negotiations on the nuclear issue.
Now, again, this is not confirmed, but it does seem as though something happened in between the time when Iran was about to launch and when they decided not to, and this MOU was announced, because they were, again, by all the available evidence, and this was reported, and this was shown by the clearing of the western half of the country's airspace, it seemed as if they were about to launch attacks against Israel, like within minutes of when this airspace was cleared. So it seems as if there was some concessions made. And the biggest one was this instant removal of the U.S. blockade from the Strait of Hormuz, which Trump announced in his Truth Social post that I just read to you. He instantly, before any terms were met, which is kind of uncharacteristic for him, before Iran had even publicly agreed to this and announced that this was real, the United States removed the naval blockade from the Strait of Hormuz, which was blockading Iranian ports, so Iranian ships couldn't leave or anything coming to Iran couldn't get in, Iranian ships couldn't leave. This was what Trump instantly removed the minute this deal was even announced, before Iran even confirmed on their end that this was real, which again is very uncharacteristic. Usually it's a wait-and-see process. For this, it was instantly an opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which signals that, number one, he was under some pressure to make a deal quickly, because not only is Israel and the neocons exerting pressure on this side, but the economy, which we just had the inflation report for May released just the other day, the economy is reeling from the fuel shortage that's come from the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and it's only going to get worse if we don't open the strait now. And it's only going to get worse leading up to the midterm. So there's a lot of incentives, both economically here in the United States, politically for him coming up to the midterms for Trump. There's a lot of incentives for us to make a deal and get out of this disastrous war, which they for sure know has been disastrous at this point. It's impossible to imagine they don't know that by now. There were many incentives coming from a bunch of different directions for Trump to make a deal quickly that opens the strait instantly. And that's what he was trying to do here by conceding that he instantly removed the blockade. What that also does is it basically concedes that Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz, which basically seems to have been quietly conceded at this point. And that's also been what's rumored to have been in this MOU, is that they will discuss finalizing during the 60-day ceasefire for the discussions during the MOU. It seems as though it will be discussed that Iran and Oman will be able to jointly or have joint control over the Strait of Hormuz and charge some sort of a toll that won't be called a toll. It'll be called like an environmental fee. But it looks as though Iran and Oman will have joint control over the Strait of Hormuz, and they'll be able to charge some sort of fee for use of the strait. So that's what seems to have been quietly conceded by the United States during this MOU, and looks like it will be discussed in further detail after Friday once this MOU is signed in person in Geneva. So that's what is going on right now in the Strait of Hormuz, and that's what looks like happened yesterday, because yesterday, again, this was a very quick turnaround. It seems as if there were some key concessions made by the Trump administration that led to this quick MOU, this announcement of an MOU, quickly after tensions were at a boiling point in the Middle East. It seems as though Iran was about to attack Israel, and then just hours later an MOU was announced. So it seems something happened between those few hours that caused Iran to say, okay, we will accept an MOU. Some key concessions seem to have been made by the Trump administration. Now, this is what we don't know about this MOU. We don't actually know the terms of the MOU from the United States side at all. We've had a lot of drafts released by the Iranian side, which frame it, as you would expect, as very favorable to Iran. We have it includes some terms like the United States will withdraw from all their bases in the region. It includes some other key points like the United States will be releasing all Iranian frozen assets, removing all sanctions from Iran. There's some major concessions, apparently, in this MOU that Iran is claiming is in the draft. We don't know for sure because we haven't had even a United States released draft of this MOU. We haven't had any independent or United States draft release. We've only had one from the Iranian side released. And originally we saw this the other day with a 14-point MOU that was released by the Iranians, which was very favorable to the Iranians. So we don't actually know for sure what the terms of this deal are. We do know, though, as it's been made clear, that one of these terms is the issue of Israel. Israel has repeatedly made it clear throughout this entire war, as they did this weekend and as they have now after this deal. They made this clear this morning. Israel has made it clear they do not intend to be less provocative, basically. They do not intend to withdraw from southern Lebanon, the fifth of the country that they occupy. They don't intend to withdraw, which is apparently, according to the Iranians, again, according to the Iranians, and this has not been disputed by the Americans to this point, according to the Iranians, that is a key point of this MOU, is that Israel will withdraw from southern Lebanon, and they will have a ceasefire in Lebanon. They'll stop the fighting, and they will withdraw. That has not been disputed by the United States. In fact, here is J.D. Vance today. J.D. Vance went on CBS Mornings to discuss this with the people over at CBS. They asked him if Israel will comply, and he says, we expect Israel to comply, meaning that he's basically agreeing with the point that Israel must stop fighting in Lebanon. Take a look.
Is Israel on board with this? It doesn't appear so at this time. What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
Well, Gail, of course, Israel's been a good partner, but we do expect everybody in the region. They've been participating in this peace agreement. They've been participating in our talks with Iran. They understand where our perspective is. And what the president has said is that we expect everybody to honor this agreement. There are always, Gail, these bumpy moments with these ceasefires. Sometimes someone will fire and sometimes somebody responds. We think right now that there are probably people within Iran, because the internet blackout, that are not even aware that this deal has happened. So we certainly expect the Israelis are going to be a participant in this peace process, but we think it's going to be good for them. It's going to be good for us. It's going to be good for the Gulf Coast Coalition. And Gail, if the Iranians comply with their end of the bargain, it's going to be good for Iran. It's going to totally change their relationship with the region in a way that will generate a lot of prosperity for their people, but again, only if they meet their end of the bargain.
J.D. Vance describes it as some bumpy moments in the relationship as Israel is flattening entire neighborhoods and slaughtering women and children in Lebanon. That's a bumpy moment for J.D. Vance. Okay. Israel has said very clearly they do not intend to withdraw or have a ceasefire in Lebanon. They've made this the Prime Minister's office came out today and said this. So that is what's going to be very interesting. We're going to see what actually happens over these next 4 days before this official signing ceremony for this MOU. Because, again, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Shahbaz Sharif, who helped broker this deal, he was the first actually to announce it, even before Trump. He made it very clear in his post on X that this includes a ceasefire on all fronts, and he said including Lebanon. So it hasn't been disputed. It's actually been seconded by J.D. Vance there on CBS. It's been seconded that this ceasefire is a ceasefire on all fronts, including Lebanon. And it's been said by multiple people in Iran that that also means a withdrawal. The IDF must leave the occupied space, that the area they've occupied in southern Lebanon. So this is the question. Over these next 4 days, this is something to watch. Will the United States actually put their foot down? As Jeremy Scahill said in that clip I just showed you from Breaking Points this morning, it's rumored that one of the key concessions given from the United States to the Iranians was that the United States will finally be able to put their foot down and get Israel to stop in Lebanon. We'll see if that's the case. We have no signaling from Trump that that's going to be the case. Besides that clip from J.D. Vance, we have no reason to believe that they're going to finally threaten the financial and military relationship between America and Israel. We have no reason to believe that at this point. So we'll see what happens. I have my doubts, but hey, if they can finally stand up to Israel, I would be very happy with that. It's been a long time coming. Can we please stand up to this country? We fund them, we arm them entirely. Their entire survival is dependent on us. Can we finally use that leverage to get them to do what we want? Is that possible? That would be nice. Now, here's another clip from J.D. Vance this morning, and this is what has the neocons freaking out. And we'll get into some more of these neocon crash outs. J.D. Vance, and this is ridiculous. I don't know what this means. Apparently, there's a $300 billion reconstruction fund headed to Iran from the Gulf. And this is the clip of J.D. Vance discussing that. Take a look.
The Iranians are saying that they're going to have access to a $300 billion reconstruction fund. True or false?
Well, Ed, that's the sort of thing they could have access to, funded by the Gulf Coast Coalition, so long as they honor their end of the obligation. I think that one of the things you're going to see, Ed, and people have to be skeptical of this, is that the hardliners in the Iranian system will overemphasize the benefits that Iran gets while underemphasizing all the things that they have to concede and all the things they have to provide in order to get these benefits. So we absolutely are open to the Gulf Coast countries investing in the reconstruction of Iran, but only if Iran ends their nuclear program, ends their enriched stockpile of material, and is really open to an inspections and enforcement regime that gives the American people confidence they're never going to have a nuclear weapon.
Throughout this entire process of the negotiations, the Iranians have been very clear about what they're demanding. Not only do they want their sanctions removed, they want the unfreezing of their assets. They also want a program for reparations. They want a reparations program that the United States will pay Iran. And that's what they've been demanding. And this seems to be a creative workaround from the Trump administration on how we will pay them without paying them. We're going to have the GCC, I guess, come together, the Gulf countries, and give Iran a $300 billion reconstruction fund, aka reparations for this war. That seems to be and J.D. Vance frames it as investing in the future of Iran. That's a very, very convenient way to try and frame paying the country as something other than paying the country. So, look, if it's not direct U.S. taxpayer money, I guess I don't care that much, but, like, why are we even discussing this? If a deal involves us if God forbid, a deal involves us personally paying the country, it would be better to just simply stop talking and walk away. This is a point Jeffrey Sachs has made repeatedly on a bunch of different podcast appearances. We don't actually need a deal. We don't need a deal. We don't need control of the strait. We don't need anything at this point. We could, just like we marched, this is what Ron Paul would always say about Iraq and Afghanistan and all these countries. Just like we marched in, we can just march out. We don't need a whole long drawn out process. We don't need these technical talks. We could just leave. It does not benefit us at all to maintain this endless presence in the Middle East, surrounding Iran with all of our bases. There's no need for this, actually. It doesn't benefit us at all. The only problem, the reason we can't do this, even though it's in the best interest of our country, is because Trump and no other U.S. president would be willing to accept something so humiliating as to have a war go as badly as this one did and then withdraw. Because that looks like a terrible loss that they're not willing to accept, because the PR from that is just a nightmare. So they're not willing to do what's in the best interest of our country, which is leave the Middle East, because it would look bad for the publicity. So this is especially Trump. Trump is not willing to look like he lost this war at all. He's desperately trying to frame it as a win. So there's no way we would withdraw without framing it in some ridiculous way. J.D. Vance and other appearances has said that he said it on Fox News yesterday after the deal was reached. He's framing the possibility of the U.S. leaving the region as us making a deal that will allow us to not have to worry about this region much anymore. That's his framing of us militarily withdrawing from the region. That doesn't require a deal, though. That's the problem. If this deal results in Iran getting hundreds of billions of dollars and we leave the region, then what's the point of us even making a deal? How about we just leave the region? We end the war, cut our losses, and leave. We don't need a comprehensive deal. It's a waste of time if that's the case. So, I mean, this is even best case scenario. It's good that there's a peace deal in the works. It's good that we're possibly moving towards a peace in the region to end this war. But it's not the best case scenario. The best case scenario is that we just literally leave. But that's not even on the table, because that would look like too obvious of a loss for this administration to take. That's where we're at right now. Now, I do want to discuss one more time this situation in Israel. There's been a massive flip. They've been all flipping out over this deal. They're all very concerned. Everyone across the Israeli political spectrum is mad at Netanyahu for letting this happen. This was the response this is in the Wall Street Journal this morning. It says, quote, Trump criticized the strikes in an interview with the Wall Street Journal and said on social media that Israel had to stop its attacks across Lebanon. That was at odds with the U.S. brokered ceasefire agreement earlier in June that only required Israel to end the fighting if Hezbollah also stopped. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the United States was on the hook to end Israel's attacks and aggression in Lebanon, state media reported. Defying those claims, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said the military would hold its so-called security zone in Lebanon indefinitely, saying it was needed to protect communities in northern Israel. He also said Israel would act independently to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons if necessary. So there's already massive doubt being cast by the Israelis, as well as their allies in the U.S. media. We'll get into some clips here from Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro in a second. The Israelis are going to frame this as they have always framed it, as if Iran is still an imminent threat of getting a nuclear weapon. They doubt that a deal can be strong enough to weaken the Iranians, so they're framing it as if, just like they did with the JCPOA, the Obama deal back in 2015. They're going to say that any deal that Trump makes is too weak, and it allows for Iran to get a nuclear weapon eventually. Even if that's not the case, that's the case they will make. Because again, what is the beef that Israel has with Iran? The beef that Israel has with Iran is that Iran is the last country remaining that is not allowing Israel to expand their borders. This is what we're seeing in Lebanon. This is exactly what it is. Israel is trying to expand into southern Lebanon. They want to take everything south of the Litani River. This is what Smotrich has said. This is what Ben-Gvir has said. And this is what Israel Katz has said. They've all said this explicitly. That's their intention with this war. They have also announced just in recent days that they're going to be taking Gaza. 70% of Gaza will be under Israeli military occupation. They're expanding settlements in the West Bank as well. They've announced their plans openly for the world to hear that they are expanding their borders in all directions. This is the Greater Israel Project. Israel's beef with Iran was not about nuclear weapons. Iran was not on the verge of getting nuclear weapons. They weren't making progress towards developing a nuke. They didn't have a weapons program, as Tulsi Gabbard said last year in her annual threat assessment as the DNI. So this is all known. It's not about nuclear weapons at all. The only reason Israel has a beef with Iran is because Iran is not letting them expand their borders without a fight. That's the entire reason. And the reason that we have this beef with Iran here in the United States is because of decades of propaganda from our media, the neocons in our media and our political class, that has convinced us that Israel's enemies are our enemies. People like Mark Levin claiming that Hezbollah is our enemy. That's what we're claiming. That Hezbollah in southern Lebanon poses a really serious threat to middle America or something. This is decades and decades of propaganda has convinced this country that Israel's enemies are our enemies. Hezbollah is our enemy because it's Israel's enemy. The Houthis are our enemy because they're Israel's enemy. Iran is our enemy because they are Israel's enemy. So therefore, we must go to war with Iran over this completely fake pretext of nuclear weapons. But the reality is because we must allow Israel to expand, we must endlessly fund and arm and support morally Israel's expansion and their murderous campaigns in Gaza and Lebanon, because we are enemies with Iran. We're enemies with Iran because they don't want Israel to expand. Israel's expansion is in our interests. This is what we've been convinced. And the reality is just completely the opposite of that. Israel's expansion is making unnecessary enemies for us. We have no reason to be funding a murderous campaign in southern Lebanon and making enemies all across the region. Why is that in our interests? How does this help us? At all. It doesn't. It hurts us. Here, to end off today, are the clips of the neocons crashing out. Here, we'll start off with Mark Levin. This is from his show last night, crashing out at Donald Trump for saying that we will make a deal that includes Lebanon in the ceasefire. Take a look.
Are we committed to protecting Hezbollah so it can continue to attack Israel and continue to brutalize the people in Lebanon? This is the lifeline that Iran is depending on. Well, if we are, then this deal won't stand. It won't stand for long, even during the Trump presidency. Israel will not be able to adhere to what would be a suicide pact. The Israeli people won't put up with it. The prime minister won't put up with it. We should not accept it either. Because remember, Hezbollah has attacked us. And when Israel is forced to defend itself, including preemptively against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and remember, they're not at war with Lebanon. They have a peace deal with Lebanon. They've never been at war with Lebanon. And it is said to be in violation of the deal. We saw this play out earlier, providing the Iranian regime with a strategic opportunity to attack Israel, claiming it's defending its ally, and that Israel violated the deal. What then? Will Israel become a pariah? And will it be admonished? Iran's counting on it, and so is Hezbollah. Hezbollah must not be in the deal. It must not, and that must be very clear. But to me, and at this stage, it's not very clear.
It's really unbelievable. Mark Levin speaking just as a mouthpiece for the Israeli regime, basically Benjamin Netanyahu's representative here in the American media. He says that Israel is not at war with Lebanon. What? Israel, so let me get this straight. Israel demolishing entire neighborhoods of homes, shooting babies in the head, which they did yesterday. Like, they've shot multiple babies in the head. That's just so we're clear of what they're doing in Lebanon. Slaughtering entire families, blowing up moving cars full of families, shooting at a motorcycle with a child on it, and demolishing blocks and blocks of homes, flattening apartment buildings. That's not at war with Lebanon?
כל הבתים בכפרים סמוכי הגבול בלבנון יהרסו. בהתאם למודל רפיח ובית חנון בעזה, כדי להסיר אחת ולתמיד את האיומים סמוכי הגבול מעל תושבי הצפון.
After leveling homes, neighborhoods, and entire cities in Gaza, Israel is exporting that model to southern Lebanon, raising civilian infrastructure in towns and villages near the border to carve a buffer zone out of Lebanese territory, which the Israeli military says is aimed at distancing Israel's northern residents from the threats posed by Hezbollah. But in one town after the next in southern Lebanon, rows of homes have been flattened, shops torn to the ground, entire neighborhoods erased. Over 6 weeks of war, the Israeli military systematically demolished the town of Eit Shab, now practically wiped from the map. Along this street in the border town of Adaissa, which once held a pharmacy and auto repair shop, one building after the next has been reduced to rubble. Even the local mosque was not spared.
What else what would you call a war with Lebanon then? This is just a game with words, because Israel doesn't claim to be at war with Lebanon. They claim to be at war with Hezbollah, yet they are just killing Lebanese people left and right. That's what we're expected to believe. This isn't a war against Lebanon. It very clearly is a war against Lebanon. What else would you call this? They've killed thousands of innocent people in Lebanon, and they claim to not be at war with Lebanon. They like the Lebanese people. Yeah, that's why they shoot them in the head. That's why they shoot and slaughter their children in the head. That's because they love Lebanon so much, because they care about the citizens of Lebanon so deeply. Give me a break. Just total propaganda. Just garbage. And the Prime Minister won't accept this, and we shouldn't accept this either. Who's we? We? The Prime Minister? What? Who's we? The American people? The American people, if you haven't noticed, are not at threat from Hezbollah. If you feel so deeply about the threat posed by Hezbollah, why don't you go on the front lines and go fight the good fight over in southern Lebanon? If you feel so deeply, instead of making the rest of this country, which has never been threatened by Hezbollah, the rest of this country should not be forced to pay into this bloody, disgusting campaign in southern Lebanon against the people of Lebanon. The occupation of a fifth of the country, the destruction of entire homes, the murder of families. Why is it on us to pay for that? To have that moral stain attached to our country? It's a disgrace. Mark Levin should go fight in the front lines with the IDF in Lebanon if he cares so deeply about this. Stop leeching off our country. The IDF should stop leeching off our country and fight their own murderous campaigns if they feel so deeply about it. Here is Ben Shapiro, similarly defending Benjamin Netanyahu against the attacks from Donald Trump, the strongly worded checks of Donald Trump. Shapiro is greatly offended by Trump's attacks on Netanyahu. Take a look.
Israel is going to have to respond to terrorism across its border, as we'll see. If the United States is going to suddenly become an advocate for the idea that Israel can't defend itself, then this is a giant L for the United States and for our allies. Israel has the right to defend itself against threats, but the attack it was responding to was very small and meaningless. Nobody was hurt, injured, or killed, and should not disrupt this important process. I really don't think the president would see it that way if, say, Mexico had fired a bunch of drones into American soil and blown them up and no one got killed. I don't think it works that way. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work that way. That you're basically free. We shouldn't spoil this, we shouldn't spoil this very important day just because you fired a rocket at my house and you happen to hit my front lawn and not kill anybody. He said, we are very close to a deal that will bring peace to the region, including to Lebanon. And all sides should stand down. All sides should stand down. One of these sides is acting defensively. One of them is a terrorist group responsible for the death of hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans. He said there should be no more attacks by Israel anywhere in Lebanon, but there should also be no more attacks by any other party, including Hezbollah, against Israel. This could be the beginning of a long and beautiful peace. Let's not blow it. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I'm sorry, these are not kids fighting here. You have a terrorist group that has expressed its desire to wipe Israel from the map, and you have an American ally flying sorties alongside American pilots, sharing technology and military largesse both ways. And the idea is that that state is supposed to what? Just go silent when it is attacked? The president went to Barack Ravid at Axios, who used to be like the Obama cutout. And then he became J.D. Vance's team's cutout over at Axios. And now the president is using Barack Ravid as his cutout. And the president went to Axios, and he said that he was shocked when his advisors called him to brief about that Israeli strike in Beirut. And he fumed at Netanyahu, quote, "It is so bad I couldn't believe it. An hour before we're supposed to sign the deal." Trump acknowledged that Hezbollah attacked Israel first, but stressed it didn't cause any damage and nobody had been killed. Why did Bibi have to do an effing attack? I was so pissed off. I let him know. He has no effing judgment. I let him know that. And then he said the same thing to the Wall Street Journal. Bibi shouldn't have done that. I didn't like it at all. They fired a couple of small missiles and missed their mark by a lot. They have to fire back, then he'll fire back, then the whole thing never stops in the Middle East. So we are now back to what? Cycle of violence nonsense?
Again, where are the priorities here? If it means that the United States can't get a peace deal because Israel must continue their operation in Lebanon, then that's just the way it has to be. Even if it's like, listen to the words coming out of his mouth. Even if a peace deal, let's just say a peace deal is in the interest of the United States, but it requires Israel to stop their operation and make peace with Lebanon. That's too far. We must throw away the interests of the United States to ensure that Israel's murderous campaign in Lebanon can continue, because that's totally necessary. It's totally necessary to the people of the United States, the people in middle America, who are paying for this war, for paying for Lebanon. We're paying for this war in Iran and this war in Lebanon. We're paying for it all. We're on the hook for all of it. It's totally necessary that Israel continues to steamroll entire family homes and shoot babies in the head because Ben Shapiro says so. Because Ben Shapiro says this war is necessary, we must now continue to fund that, even though it's not in our country's interests. Even though it's in our country's interest to end the war with Iran and make a peace deal to stop the fighting, we must sacrifice that. We must put that to the side because Israel has an operation they want to do. Israel would like to achieve greater Israel. They would like to occupy a third of Lebanon. So we must step back, and we are on the hook for funding that. Because why? It's never explained. We have to fund it regardless, so they never even bother to explain to us why it's necessary for us to be involved in this ridiculous campaign in Lebanon. But we are, because it's in Israel's interest. If those two clips are not the most explicitly Israel-first clips that you've seen, then I'm sorry. What else can you call that besides prioritizing a foreign country over your own? It's too open and explicit. That's where we'll end it off for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to go down below this video and hit like and subscribe here on YouTube. And also go follow my Instagram, X, Spotify, and my Substack. And I'll give all those a follow. Stay updated on all those platforms as well. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.